Hi, I'm Kaede. This is a solo audio podcast about the hidden forces behind global events. No guests, no fluff, and definitely no funny animal videos. This is slow, thoughtful learning, not 15 seconds TikTok clip. If you're ready to think deeper, thanks for listening. Let's dive in. Welcome to Material Logic Unmasked, how capitalism's hidden forces shape the ultra-wealthy. Here's a question that'll completely shatter everything you think you know about billionaire behavior. In 2024, billionaire wealth surged by $2 trillion. That's $5.5 billion every single day. Meanwhile, global poverty barely moved. Now think about that for a moment. Elon Musk became the first person to reach $400 billion in net worth. At the same time, Tesla remains America's only major automaker without unions. Warren Buffett preaches higher taxes while his company deploys sophisticated strategies to minimize them. Here's the twist, though. This isn't hypocrisy. It's the predictable output of a hidden machinery that operates regardless of personal values. Today, we're going to unveil that machinery. Picture this contradiction in sharp focus. Elon Musk, worth $400 billion, champions human progress. Meanwhile, Tesla employs over 140,000 workers globally, with almost none unionized. Jeff Bezos launches climate initiatives, while Amazon warehouse workers collapse from heat exhaustion. This isn't moral failure, it's mechanical precision. Oxfam calculates that 36% of billionaire wealth is now inherited. That reveals a system that rewards position over production. The contradictions aren't bugs in the system, they're features. These patterns emerge with mathematical consistency across cultures and industries. Warren Buffett's famous confession cuts right to the bone. There's class warfare, all right, but it's my class, the rich class, that's making war and we're winning. The system doesn't reward good intentions. It rewards maximum extraction of what economists call surplus value. This creates what researchers term structural coercion. These are invisible forces that shape behavior independent of personal ethics. The machinery whispers through every balance sheet, every quarterly report, every stock option grant. What makes this analysis truly devastating is its predictive power. Silicon Valley moguls, Russian oligarchs, and Saudi princes operate in vastly different cultures. Yet they demonstrate identical patterns of wealth accumulation and labor suppression. This isn't cultural coincidence, it's structural necessity. They occupy similar positions in a global economic system that operates according to laws as predictable as gravity. The machinery runs the same code regardless of who sits at the controls. Let's start with what most people see on the surface. Popular media loves its moral scorecards. The BBC's Good Bad Billionaire podcast rates Jeff Bezos as bad and Oprah as good. This is based on philanthropic gestures and public statements. This personality-driven circus creates what LSE researchers call ambivalent narratives. These deliberately avoid examining structural forces. When Bill Gates proclaims, "Leaders will be those who empower others," while his foundation's policies maintain global inequality, we witness the gap where moral rhetoric meets material reality. The scoreboard distracts from the game itself. Public opinion reveals the limitations of this morality play. While 71% of Americans believe billionaires aren't doing enough with their fortunes, these moral expectations miss the fundamental dynamic. The system doesn't reward ethical behavior. It rewards profit maximization with mechanical precision. Research shows 42% of shareholders don't expect high ethical behavior from corporate officers. That reveals widespread acceptance that markets punish moral choices that reduce returns. The audience knows the show is rigged. This moral framing creates what scholars call the agency illusion. It's the comforting belief that economic outcomes flow from individual choices rather than structural imperatives. The fantasy suggests that finding better billionaires with stronger ethics will somehow self-correct the system. But when billionaires consistently oppose unionization across diverse industries and cultural contexts, we're not witnessing coordinated greed. We're observing predictable outputs of material logic operating with algorithmic precision. The illusion sells hope. The reality delivers outcomes. Let's go deeper. Here's where structure reveals its teeth. Karl Marx identified capitalism as operating through systematic laws of motion. These are behavioral imperatives you don't get to rewrite, only obey. Think of these as the system's source code running beneath every business decision. The first law is surplus value extraction. Profit emerges from the gap between value workers create and wages they receive. This isn't greed, it's the engine functioning as designed. The system mechanically rewards maximum extraction while systematically crushing alternatives. Capitalism doesn't whisper suggestions. It commands through every earnings call. The second law demands endless expansion. Capitalism requires constant growth through new markets and resources, or it faces crisis. This explains why billionaires like Musk and Bezos span multiple sectors, from automotive to space exploration. It's not visionary ambition, it's survival programming. When traditional markets saturate, capital must find new frontiers or collapse. David Harvey calls this spatial fix, geographical expansion resolving accumulation crises. Amazon's global reach and Tesla's international factories aren't strategic choices. They're metabolic requirements. The third law is relentless competition. It's systematic rivalry forcing cost optimization regardless of ethics. When one company maximizes returns, others must follow or lose market position. This creates structural coercion that overrides personal values through competitive pressure. Thomas Piketty's data reveals that return on capital consistently exceeds economic growth. That means wealth automatically concentrates among asset owners rather than workers. The machinery operates according to physical laws that shape behavior independent of who occupies the driver's seat. Now let's see how this pressure works in practice. Understanding structural coercion requires examining competitive pressure in action. When Tesla faces cost competition from BYD in electric vehicle markets, the company must respond with efficiency measures or lose market share. This isn't Musk's personal vendetta against workers. It's competitive necessity encoded in the system. Studies show companies prioritizing worker welfare over profit margins consistently get outcompeted by those who don't. The research is brutal. Ethical behavior that reduces returns gets eliminated through market selection. Capitalism operates like a treadmill without an off switch. Material logic explains why similar patterns emerge across different industries with mechanical consistency. Whether examining tech platforms in California or manufacturing in China, we observe remarkably similar labor exploitation, tax optimization, and political influence tactics. The specifics vary, but the core dynamic remains constant. Capital accumulation drives behavior regardless of cultural context. When technology executives claim they had no choice in implementing surveillance systems, they're acknowledging structural forces that operate independent of personal ethics. The algorithm always wins. The predictive power becomes clear through historical analysis. Marx predicted monopoly tendencies before digital technology existed. Now it's manifest in big tech dominating entire sectors. He predicted political system capture by economic interests. Now it's visible in campaign finance and regulatory revolving doors. These aren't accidental developments, but logical outcomes of material forces operating with the consistency of natural laws. The machinery produces similar results across time and space, regardless of individual personalities feeding the controls. That pressure, let's see how it plays out at the top. Tesla exemplifies structural imperatives overriding stated values through documented patterns spanning 2020 to 2025. Despite Musk's public persona as sustainability visionary, Tesla remains America's only major automaker, with over 140,000 workers globally and almost none unionized. In 2021, the NLRB found Tesla guilty of violating federal labor law. They fired union organizer Richard Ortiz and threatened stock option removal from unionized workers. When 30 workers at Tesla's Buffalo facility announced unionization plans in February 2023, they were terminated the next day. This isn't strategy, it's systematic survival programming. This pattern reflects competitive necessity within automotive markets, not personal anti-worker sentiment. Swedish mechanics have maintained strikes at Tesla since October 2023. It's the longest labor dispute in Sweden since 1938, with solidarity actions across Scandinavia. Yet Tesla continues these practices because labor costs directly impact competitiveness against rivals like BYD and traditional automakers. The company hired surveillance firms to monitor employee social media and research union organizers. This demonstrates systematic opposition driven by material logic rather than personal hostility. The machinery doesn't hate workers, it optimizes around them. This pattern reflects competitive necessity within automotive markets, not personal anti-worker sentiment. Swedish mechanics have maintained strikes at Tesla since October 2023. It's the longest labor dispute in Sweden since 1938, with solidarity actions across Scandinavia. Yet Tesla continues these practices because labor costs directly impact competitiveness against rivals like BYD and traditional automakers. The company hired surveillance firms to monitor employee social media and research union organizers. This demonstrates systematic opposition driven by material logic rather than personal hostility. The machinery doesn't hate workers, it optimizes around them. Here's how the same logic operates through different tactics. Warren Buffett provides sophisticated theater demonstrating how material logic operates within ethical frameworks. While publicly advocating higher taxes through the Buffett rule for minimum 30% rates on wealthy Americans, his company Berkshire Hathaway paid a record $26.8 billion in federal taxes in 2024. That's about 5% of all corporate taxes collected. This massive payment, which Buffett celebrated as corporate patriotism, demonstrates how the system allows simultaneous tax advocacy and optimization through sophisticated strategies unavailable to individual taxpayers. The performance of virtue serves the machinery of accumulation with mathematical precision. The contradiction sharpens when examining Buffett's charitable strategy. His donations to the Gates Foundation systematically avoid capital gains taxes on appreciated Berkshire shares. This deprives the Treasury of millions in taxes he publicly supports. This isn't personal hypocrisy, but structural positioning. The system rewards optimization while maintaining public legitimacy through philanthropic theater. Buffett's aggregate $101 billion in tax payments over time occurs alongside sophisticated minimization, requiring massive capital resources. The machinery creates legitimacy without changing fundamental relationships. This reveals material logic sophistication, allowing moral signaling while preserving wealth-generating mechanisms intact. Buffett can advocate for higher taxes precisely because his structural position ensures such advocacy won't threaten his accumulation. The machinery generates legitimacy without altering power relations. When the Oracle of Omaha admits there's class warfare, and we're winning, he's acknowledging structural gravity that shapes behavior regardless of personal preferences. The Oracle speaks the code runs the Oracle. Now let's bring this down to street level. To understand structural forces at every scale, meet Maria. She owns an independent bookstore in Portland. She built her business around ethical principles, paying employees $18 per hour, offering flexible schedules for students, sourcing from local suppliers whenever possible. When a major chain opens nearby with prices 20% lower through centralized distribution and lower labor costs, Maria confronts the brutal arithmetic of structural coercion. Despite her values, declining sales force her to cut employee hours and eliminate benefits to remain competitive. The system doesn't evaluate her intentions, it only processes her outcomes. Maria's experience reveals structural coercion operating with mechanical precision at small scale. The market rewards lowest prices regardless of how those prices are achieved. This creates competitive pressure that overrides personal ethics through survival threats. Recent surveys show 70% of small business owners feel forced to compromise sustainability or labor standards to compete on price. This illustrates how competitive dynamics operate consistently across firm sizes. The treadmill runs at every level. The code executes everywhere. Size doesn't matter to the algorithm. Economic pressure intensifies these compromises with predictable regularity. During COVID-19, small businesses faced unprecedented challenges that forced increasingly severe trade-offs between ethical practices and survival. Research shows uncertainty encourages firms to prioritize short-term survival over values-based decision-making through systematic risk calculation. Maria's constraints echo those facing Tesla and Berkshire Hathaway, different scales, identical logic. The machinery operates independently of size, culture, or personal conviction. The algorithm is scale invariant. Watch how this creates an unstoppable pattern. Narrative 1. Maria's bookstore demonstrates how competitive pressure creates what economists call race to the bottom dynamics. When one competitor cuts costs through labor suppression, others must follow or face market elimination. This isn't coordination or conspiracy. It's material logic operating through market mechanisms with algorithmic precision. Research shows companies near the performance frontier prioritize survival over values more frequently as competitive margins tighten. The system rewards maximum surplus value extraction while systematically eliminating ethical alternatives. Maria isn't broken. She's running the same code as Musk. Studies from Indonesia on microfinance and small business reveal identical trade-offs between social responsibility and financial sustainability across cultures. Small business owners consistently report tension between personal motivations and business imperatives, often leading to compromised ethics in the interest of survival. This pattern appears globally across industries, suggesting structural coercion operates as universal feature of capitalist competition rather than localized phenomenon. The code is portable, the logic is universal, the algorithm crosses all borders. Marx's analytical brilliance becomes evident observing how predictably these patterns emerge. Given sufficient time and competitive pressure, different actors occupying similar positions converge on similar practices regardless of initial values or cultural background. Companies in identical industries develop remarkably similar labor practices, pricing strategies, and supply chain operations. This isn't coordinated conspiracy, but material logic guiding behavior toward profit-maximizing equilibrium through invisible structural coercion. The algorithm optimizes, the actors comply, the outcomes converge. Let's pull back and see the full picture. Narrative 1. Returning to our original paradox, when billionaires exhibit ethical contradictions despite varying personal values, we're witnessing systematic structural gravity, not individual moral failures. The machinery operates with mechanical precision, creating predictable patterns that transcend personality and culture. Musk's simultaneous environmental advocacy and labor suppression, Buffett's tax advocacy alongside sophisticated optimization. These aren't personal inconsistencies, but logical outcomes of positions within a system that rewards accumulation over ethics. The contradictions are features, not bugs. The machinery is working perfectly. LSE researcher Michael Vaughan warns that focusing on individual billionaire morality risks neglecting the structural dimensions of inequality dynamics and reinforces, legitimizing narratives of meritocracy. When billionaire wealth surged by $2 trillion in 2024, while global poverty remained stagnant, this wasn't because individuals became greedier. It was because the system naturally funnels wealth upward during any economic conditions through structural mechanisms independent of personal virtue. The elevator only goes one way. The algorithm knows one direction. The persistence of these patterns, despite decades of moral appeals, reveals the accuracy of Marx's structural analysis. When attempts at ethical capitalism, through individual virtue, consistently fail to change systemic outcomes, we observe the limits of agency within structures designed to reward accumulation. Understanding material logic shifts focus from individual behavior to machinery that produces predictable results regardless of who operates the controls. The system makes ethics expensive. The market makes morality unsustainable. The algorithm makes alternatives extinct. Here's where we leave you with the real challenge. Here's the challenge that changes everything. Stop personalizing systemic outcomes. The next time billionaires face criticism for greed or praise for philanthropy, ask yourself, how much represents personal choice versus structural position in the economic system? When 36% of billionaire wealth now derives from inheritance rather than innovation, we see machinery behind the myths. The contradictions aren't moral failures. They're predictable outputs of material logic operating with mechanical precision. In our next episode, The Golden Explosion, we'll explore how these structural forces operated during the 2020 to 2025 crisis period. We'll see how they created unprecedented wealth concentration while millions fell into poverty. What happens when crises don't just reveal the system's true nature, but accelerate it beyond recognition? Thank you for joining this journey into material logic. The machinery is vast, but it's not invisible once you learn to see the code.